A book that scared me had a grocery receipt tucked into page 214. On the back, someone had written, "Tuesdays after 6, porch light stays on." In September of 2010, I drove a mobile library route in northern Minnesota. The bus was an old Bluebird with bolted shelves and a heater that smelled like hot dust. My route ran from Bemidji past Black Duck, then east through Kelleher and Waskish. Some stops were only mailboxes at the ends of logging roads. Most regulars were older people or families with one car. I knew who liked westerns and who needed large print. The book came from Earl. Earl lived outside Kelleher in a green-sided house. He usually returned 2 mysteries. That day he handed me 3. "One isn't mine," he said. 2 had county library stickers. The third was a hardback called The Cold River. No barcode, no call number. The plastic cover was cloudy and smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. "Where'd you get it?" "Thought it came from you. Found it in my return pile." People mixed up books all the time, so I set it aside. Earl picked 2 replacements and went inside. I opened The Cold River at lunch near Upper Red Lake. Wind moved the bus on its shocks while I looked for an owner stamp. There wasn't one. A corner had been folded down on page 214. That's where I found the receipt. It was from a Super One store in Bemidji, dated 2 weeks earlier. The note was on the back, followed by an address on County Road 39. I knew it. The house belonged to Marlene, another regular. At first I figured Marlene had lent Earl the book and used the receipt as a reminder. Strange, but not enough to call anyone over. Marlene lived alone in a yellow house near a gravel pit. Her little dog barked behind the screen while she carried out her returns. I showed her the book. "I had that," she said. "Last month, maybe." "From us?" "I thought so." She opened the back cover. There was a checkout card in here. My name was on it. Our system had been computerized for years. We never kept cards inside books. "Who gave it to you?" "It was in my mailbox." Then she frowned. "The one by the kitchen, inside." I asked if she meant someone had put it in her house. "I guess so. I thought you left it when I wasn't home." I had never gone inside. None of us did. Her dog began scratching the screen, a quick dry scrape that kept going while I showed her the receipt. "I go to bingo Tuesdays," she said, "in Black Duck." "When do you get back?" "Around 8. I kept the book and told her to lock up. She gave me the look people give when they think you're making too much of something. I called my supervisor, Dana, when I got a signal near Waskish. "Bring it in tomorrow," she said. "Probably a prank. Somebody put it inside her house." That's what she remembers. Marlene did forget things sometimes. Dana told me to photograph the note and lock the book in the bus. The next morning, another book showed up. Ron returned it outside Funkley. He lived behind an abandoned gas station and mostly checked out repair manuals. It was a paperback about a prison escape. No barcode. "This yours?" I asked. "Was on my steps." Inside were old paper checkout cards held with a rubber band. The names were all people on my route. Earl, Marlene, Ron, Denny, Sharon. Beside each name was a number in blue ink. I thought they were phone numbers until I saw they matched addresses. Ron leaned over the desk. "That's Denny's place," he said, tapping one. "Farmhouse by the feedlot." Some addresses had notes. "Works overnights. Dog stays inside after rain. Gone Friday through Sunday." Next to Ron's address it said, "Tow truck gone means sleeping." Ron drove nights for a shop in Bemidji. When he was on call, the truck might be gone while he slept between jobs. "Who wrote that?" he asked. "I don't know." His voice stayed level. "You got a camera in here?" One camera faced the bus door. We checked it. Nobody entered after my last stop, so the paperback had not come from the bus. I called Dana again. This time she told me to end the route and come back to Bemidji. I was 40 miles out with a tote for Kelleher. I headed for the community center rather than mark homes as missed on the route sheet, which listed names and addresses. By then, that sheet felt like something I shouldn't be carrying. Wet leaves stuck to the road. Books slid in their racks on every curve. The community center was locked. A note said the clerk had gone to lunch. I carried the tote back to the bus. A man stood across the street beside an older Buick, brown work jacket, dark cap. He was smoking and looking toward me. When I looked directly at him, he got in the car. Mud covered part of the plate. I wrote down what I could. Then I saw a book on the step inside the bus. It had not been there when I got out. It was a children's book about a bear camping. A county barcode had been peeled from the worn cover. I looked back down the street. The Buick was gone. The door had been open while I carried the tote. Someone could have crossed behind me in seconds. I locked the door and opened the book. 3 pages were marked with strips cut from index cards. Each strip had a name and address. One was Sharon, who lived alone near Shotley. Another was Paul, a retired teacher. The third had no name. It was the address of the county garage where I parked the bus. Under it, someone had written, "Driver leaves personal car here, usually back by 5:30. I called Dana and said I was changing route. Then I called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher told me a deputy would meet me at the Central Library. I took Highway 72. A pickup followed for several miles, too far back for me to read the plate, then turned off before Black Duck. Dana met me with Deputy Cal. He looked annoyed until he read the cards. Then he put on gloves. We took the 3 unknown books into a conference room and searched them page by page. The prison paperback had underlined sentences whose page numbers matched notes on the cards. Page 61 mentioned an unlatched window. On Sharon's card, someone had written 61, kitchen. Inside the bear book was a rough map of Paul's property. It showed a shed behind his house that could not be seen from the county road. The Cold River held a second receipt. 4 addresses were written on it with dates. One date was that night. The address belonged to Denny. Cal called a deputy near Denny's place. Nobody answered. Denny worked at a lumber mill and was due there until midnight. Dana searched the catalog. None of the books existed in it. Then she checked borrower histories. The system said Marlene had checked out the Cold River on August 12th. Ron had checked out the prison book a week later. The bear book had been issued to Paul 6 days earlier. Every transaction came from a remote terminal, labeled BR04. Dana stared at the screen. "That terminal doesn't exist," she said. BR04 had belonged to a small branch in Turtle River. The branch closed in 2005 after water damage. Its computers were removed and the terminal was listed as surplus. Cal asked if someone could fake the name. Dana said they would still need system access. The old branches had dialed in by modem, and one service account remained active for archived records. "Who knew that?" Cal asked. Dana mentioned current staff, county IT, and a few former employees. The library started calling everyone named in the books. Sharon was home. Paul was at a clinic in Bemidji. Earl's nephew picked him up. Marlene drove to her sister's place before dark. Denny did not answer. Around 6, Cal got a call. Another deputy had found Denny at work. Denny agreed to stay with a coworker after his shift. Dana printed the access logs. The latest connection from BR04 had happened that morning, 12 minutes before Ron gave me the paperback. The connection came through a phone line registered to a detached garage north of Bemidji. The property belonged to Wes, a former librarian. Wes had worked for the county before I started. Dana said he knew the old system and had resigned after complaints that he used borrower records for personal reasons. Cal and another deputy went to the property. I stayed at the library because they wanted me to identify the Buick. It was parked behind the garage, with mud smeared across the plate. Inside, they found BR04 connected to a phone modem beside stacks of discarded library books. Most had names written inside. Route maps covered one wall. There were keys with address labels tied to them. Cal never told me what they opened. That night, someone broke a side window at Denny's house. A bedroom drawer had been pulled out, and a metal cash box was gone. Denny was still at his coworker's place. The deputy found fresh tire tracks behind the barn, but no vehicle. Wes was in custody when it happened. Cal said that did not clear him. The route stopped for 2 weeks. When it reopened, the schedule changed monthly. Printed addresses were removed, and every old remote account was disabled. A few days after we reopened, I stopped at Earl's house. He returned the Louis L'Amour and the Korean War book. Then he handed me a third one. It was the Cold River. Same cloudy cover. Same cigarette smell. I put it in a plastic bag, locked the bus, and called Cal from Earl's driveway. While we waited, Earl stood on his porch with both hands in his coat pockets. "That one wasn't in my return pile," he said. "Where was it?" He pointed toward the side of his house. "Kitchen table." What bothered me immediately was the address. The county road ended at a cattle gate, but our tablet said we still had half a mile to go. My company was sending mobile lab crews across rural Georgia in August of 2020. We drove a converted Ford Transit with a refrigerator, a centrifuge, and boxes of gloves. I drove and handled paperwork. Tasha, the medical technician, did the blood draws. Our last appointment that day came in late. The patient was an adult man listed as unable to leave bed. The address was south of Roberta, past a closed peach stand and a white church with a gravel parking lot. The request looked normal in our system and had been approved through the patient portal. The note said, "Use rear entrance, patient in basement." Tasha read it and said, "Basement? Could be a split level. Out here?" I shrugged. We had seen stranger houses. The GPS took us off the pavement onto red dirt. Pine branches scraped the van, and the racks in back clicked with every rut. There were no utility poles after the first turn. Then we reached the gate. It was open, but there was no mailbox, sign, or house number. The track continued through the trees. I called the number on the order. A man answered after 4 rings. "We're at the gate," I said. "I see you." I looked through the windshield. A man stepped from behind a pine about 40 yards ahead. He wore jeans, work boots, and a gray t-shirt dark with sweat. He raised one hand and walked toward us. Tasha said, "Why was he standing there?" Maybe he heard the van. That was possible. The engine was loud and the road was dry. I lowered the window a few inches and asked if this was the address for the patient. "Yeah, my uncle. He's down at the house." He leaned closer. Gasoline and old sweat came through the gap. "Follow me. Road gets soft on the left." I asked about the missing mailbox. "Got knocked down." He walked ahead while I eased through the gate. After the first bend, a low brick house appeared between the trees. One front window was covered with plywood. Kudzu reached across part of the roof. There were no cars, trash cans, or porch chairs. The electric meter box was open, and the meter was gone. I parked facing the road. Tasha noticed. "Good." The man pointed around back. "Basement door's there. He's heavy, so we couldn't bring him up." "Who's we?" Tasha asked. "Me and my cousin." "Where's your cousin?" "Went to town." His answers came fast. I asked if the power was out. "Storm." There had not been a storm that week. Tasha stayed beside the passenger door. "We can do the draw on the van if you bring him out." "He can't walk." "We need his ID before we unload." "It's downstairs." He did not seem confused by our questions. He seemed prepared for them. "Come look first," he said, "then get what you need." He led us behind the house. I locked the van and heard the horn chirp. The backyard was bare clay. A broken riding mower sat under corrugated metal. Near the trees was a black motorcycle with no plate. A red fuel can stood beside it. The basement entrance was below ground level. One door hung crooked. The other had a new silver padlock dangling open. The man pulled the door wider. The stairs went down into darkness. "We need light," Tasha said. "I got one." He clicked on a small flashlight. Its yellow beam showed concrete steps and a cinder block wall. "We have better lights in the van," I said. "No need. He's right there." That was the first time he sounded irritated. Then a voice came from below. It was low and rough. I could not make out the words. Tasha looked down the stairs. The man said, "That's him. He gets confused." The voice came again. It sounded like help, though the basement made it hard to tell. That put us in a bad spot. We were not paramedics, but we could not ignore someone calling from below. I said we would bring one small kit and check the patient first. Back at the van, I set my phone in the cup holder with 911 ready. We had one bar, then none. Tasha packed a draw bag and took our heavy metal flashlight. "Door stays open," she said. We returned together. The man had not moved. He went down first. I followed, then Tasha. The steps were damp at the bottom. The air smelled like bleach poured over mildew. There was no patient in the first room. There was a folding table, 2 chairs, a mattress against the wall, and a battery lantern bright enough to light everything. His weak flashlight had been unnecessary. On the table were opened alcohol pads, gauze wrappers, tourniquets, and a plastic rack filled with used blood tubes. Tasha stopped. Some tubes had purple caps, others gold. A few had dark residue inside. Every one carried a printed label. The labels came from different hospitals and clinics around central Georgia. Dates from several weeks. Different patient names. Tasha said, "These aren't yours." The man was now behind us near the stairs. "My cousin works medical." "No," she said. "Those are patient labels." A sound came from the next room. It was the same rough voice saying, "Help!" Then it stopped. The man had one hand in his pocket. For a second, nobody moved. Then he smiled, small and embarrassed, like we had caught him doing a cheap trick. Tasha closed the draw bag. "We need the patient's ID," she said. The man nodded toward a doorway behind the table. A stained sheet covered it. "He's through there." "Move the sheet," Tasha said. The man did not answer. A new extension cord ran under the sheet. Beside the mattress sat a roll of duct tape. I said, "We need the transfer board." We did not carry one. The man shifted just enough to block the stairs. "She can stay. You go." Tasha said, "Equipment checks require both of us." That was also made up, but she said it without hesitation. His face changed. Not anger exactly. More like he was tired of waiting. "Just take the blood." "We can't without ID," I said. "You got the order. ID still has to match." He stepped toward Tasha. I held the metal flashlight across my chest. He stopped and gave a short laugh. "Y'all are making this hard." I said we would get the board, verify the patient, and finish in 5 minutes. He watched us, then moved aside. We walked up the stairs at a normal pace. I expected the door to slam behind us. It stayed open. Outside, the sun was so bright it hurt my eyes. Tasha headed for the van. The man followed about 10 feet behind. At the rear bumper, I stopped and slapped the side panel. "Damn it." Tasha looked at me. "Generator fault again," I said loudly. The generator was fine. I opened the driver's door and leaned inside, as if checking the controls. The man came closer. "What's wrong?" "Starter sticks in the heat. Can you help me reset it?" He hesitated. I pointed under the back bumper, black cover by the exhaust. "Pull the yellow latch when I tell you." Tasha walked around, opened the passenger door, and climbed in with the bag. The man looked toward the basement, then approached the rear bumper. "Which cover?" "Right under there." I got into the driver's seat and shut the door. The locks hit almost together. He heard them and ran to the passenger side. He grabbed the handle before Tasha had fully closed her door. She pulled inward while he pulled back. I dropped the van into drive. The rear tires spun on the clay, then caught. He ran beside us for a few steps, still holding the handle. Then he lost it. I cut across the yard instead of backing out. The van bounced through a shallow ditch and hit the dirt track sideways. Cabinets slammed open behind us. In the mirror, the man ran toward the motorcycle. I kept my foot down. Branches struck the windshield. Dust covered the mirrors. At the cattle gate, the steering wheel kicked hard in a rut, and we clipped a post with the passenger mirror, but we made the paved road. Tasha's phone found a signal. She called 911 and gave the road name. The dispatcher asked for a house number, but we did not have one. Then the motorcycle came out behind us. The man had no helmet and his headlight was off. He gained quickly. The van was heavy. I pushed it to 65, which felt reckless on that road. He stayed behind for the first mile, then moved toward the center line. "He's coming up," Tasha said. There were no shoulders, only drainage ditches. When he tried to pass on the left, I moved toward the center. He dropped back and tried the right, riding on gravel. Stones hammered the underside of the van. He pulled even with the rear wheel. I saw his face in the passenger mirror. He was not yelling. He was staring through the glass at Tasha. A pickup came around the next curve. I moved back into my lane. The motorcycle fell behind to avoid it, and the pickup driver leaned on his horn. Near the closed peach stand, the road straightened. The white church was ahead. The motorcycle was still behind us. At the church, the road split. The main route curved toward Roberta. A narrow county road ran east. I stayed on the main road. The motorcycle turned east and vanished between two fields. We met a sheriff's vehicle 4 miles later and stopped at a gas station beside a Dollar General. Deputies searched the house that afternoon. There was no patient. The voice had come from an audio file on the man's phone. They found more medical labels, several coolers, boxes of clinic supplies, and zip ties in the room behind the sheet. The name on our appointment belonged to a real patient in Bibb County. He had never requested a home visit. Someone had accessed his portal, changed the phone number, and submitted the order using his insurance. The address was altered after approval. The motorcycle was found 2 days later in a ditch. The man was gone. A month later, my supervisor showed me 6 canceled appointments tied to the same phone number. Ours was the only one marked completed. One thing the man asked was why Dale wasn't driving the route. He didn't ask who I was or what the certified letter was. He looked past me at the mail truck and said, "Where's Dale?" In December 2009, I was covering rural routes out of a small post office north of Fort Kent. I was a substitute carrier. Dale had called in twice that week. The first day, people said he had the flu. The second day, nobody seemed sure. Linda, our supervisor, gave me his scanner, keys, and route cards with directions written in pencil. Most of the route followed Route 161, then broke off onto roads that looked private. Snowbanks were shoulder high. It was around 10 below, and the heater in the old LLV smelled like hot dust without warming my feet. The letter needed a signature. The address was on Pelletier Cut, though Dale's card said the last mile had no sign. He had written, "Blue Gate, house sits back, dog sometimes loose." Under that, in darker pencil, he'd added, "Do not leave notice in box, bring to door." Pelletier Cut was barely plowed. I passed 2 winter camps, a logging spur, then nothing for almost 3 miles. My Motorola had no signal. The truck rattled over frozen washboard. The Blue Gate was open. It was wide enough for a pickup, with a chain hanging from one side. Beyond it, a long driveway curved through spruce. Tire tracks went in under a thin crust of new snow. I didn't see any coming out. I stopped and checked the cart again. Dale's note said there was room to turn around near the garage. I almost parked outside, but the cold had already made my fingers stiff. I drove in. The house had gray siding and a metal roof. A detached garage stood to the right with one door open. An old pickup was parked beside it, with a snowmobile under a tarp. I could hear a generator behind the house. A man came outside before I reached the steps. He was in his 50s, wearing insulated bibs over a red flannel shirt, no coat. A red mark crossed the bridge of his nose, like he'd taken off glasses. He walked toward me slowly, watching the truck. "Certified letter for Roy," I said. "Where's Dale?" "I'm covering the route." "Why?" "He's out sick." The man glanced at the envelope, then toward the road. "Since when?" I held out the signature board and pen. "I just need you to sign." He didn't take them. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. At first I thought he meant I'd pulled too far into the drive. Rural customers could get particular about where you parked. I said, "I'll back out after you sign." He stepped closer. His shirt was open at the neck, and I could smell old gasoline on him. "Who sent you?" "The post office." "I know that. Who decided you were taking Dale's truck?" "It's assigned to the route." That bothered him. He looked at the vehicle number, then asked my name. I gave him my first name. "I won't put it here." He repeated it softly. "Are you Roy?" I asked. "You got identification?" That was when I noticed the garage. Near the back wall was a blue postal shoulder bag. The reflective strip caught the light. People bought old bags at auctions, so that was my first explanation. Then I saw a carrier shirt hanging over a chair. On the concrete below it were black framed glasses with one lens popped out. Dale wore thick black frames. The man saw where I was looking and moved sideways, blocking the bay. "Garage sale stuff," he said. I hadn't asked. The generator shut off. In the quiet, I heard the truck engine ticking and snow squeaking under his boots. I put the signature board against my chest. "I can leave a notice. You can pick up the letter in town." "No." "Then I need a signature." "I said you're not supposed to be here." He reached for the envelope. I pulled it back. "Certified mail doesn't get handed over first." He stared at my hand. "Come inside," he said. "We'll call your office and fix the mistake." "My phone works fine." It didn't. He probably knew that. "Landline's inside." "I'll call from the road." He looked toward the garage. "Dale left something here. You can bring it back to him." "Dale's home sick." He didn't answer. Then I heard metal dragging behind me. The blue gate was moving. A cable ran from the gatepost through a pipe buried in the snow and back toward the porch. The man had one boot on a lever. The gate swung shut and the chain fell across it. He lifted his foot. Wind catches it. There was almost no wind. I backed toward the truck. He followed at the same pace. "Come in for a minute," he said. "You're getting worked up." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." I reached the driver's door. Those old sliding doors stuck in cold weather. I pulled the handle. Nothing. The man was maybe 8 feet away. I yanked harder. The door opened with a metal snap. I threw the board onto the floor and climbed in. He grabbed the edge before I could shut it. "You're leaving the letter," he said. "I can't." His hand tightened. Up close, I saw a cut on his cheek and dried blood in the crease of his thumb. I reached for the gear selector. He pulled the door wider. The engine was running. I dropped into drive and stepped on the gas. His hand slipped off. He jumped away as the truck lurched forward. The driveway looped near the garage, but the pickup blocked it. I went around the house, following tire marks through a side yard. Snow scraped the bottom. The rear wheels spun, caught, and brought me back toward the gate. The man beat me there. He wrapped the chain around the post and stood behind it. "Turn it off." The gate connected to a wooden rail fence. On the left, it crossed a flat strip between the driveway and the trees. The post looked old. The man walked toward me. Something short and dark hung from his right hand, maybe a wrench. He said my name. I put the letter on the dash. My hands were shaking enough that it slid against the windshield. "Step out," he said. "This can be cleared up." I reversed almost to the house, then lined up with the left side of the fence. I remember thinking about paperwork and vehicle damage. Stupid work rules that still felt real for a few seconds. Then I saw Dale's bag in the garage again. I shoved the tray of letters off the shelf. They spilled through the open door and scattered over the driveway. The man looked at them. I hit the gas. The front bumper split the top rail. The truck jumped. One post snapped at ground level and struck the side step with a sound like a rifle shot. The rear wheels spun, caught, and pushed us through. The driver's mirror tore off. Then I was back on Pelletier Cut. I didn't slow down. The truck fishtailed, and loose mail blew out through the open door. I tried to pull it shut, but it jammed halfway. In the remaining mirror, I saw the man run to the garage and yank the tarp off the snowmobile. It started on the second try. The LLV was slow even on pavement. On packed snow, it felt ready to tip. I held it near 40 and stayed off the brakes. The snowmobile appeared at the first straight section. Its headlight bounced between the trees. The engine grew louder over the truck's rattling panels. I took a curve too wide and clipped the snowbank. Powder burst through the half-open door and covered my leg. The truck leaned, then dropped back. The snowmobile came alongside. The man had put on a dark coat, but no helmet. He pointed forward, then down, ordering me to stop like this was a traffic argument. I kept going. He dropped back near a narrow bridge, then came up on the passenger side. There was a metal step below the rear cargo door. He was aiming for it. The snowmobile vanished from the mirror, but the engine stayed close. A second later, the rear of the truck dipped. He had jumped. One bare hand appeared around the cargo opening. Then his face came into view behind the wire rack. He was hanging from the rear step, trying to pull himself inside while the snowmobile rolled into the ditch. The road climbed toward Route 161. Through the trees, I could see the highway, plowed and sanded. I held straight until the front tires hit clear pavement. Then I turned hard right. The rear tires grabbed and the truck snapped sideways. His hand vanished. I heard one dull impact behind me, then the scrape of his coat over sand. I didn't stop. I drove south until my phone showed one bar near a rise above the river. I called the post office because I knew the number without looking. Linda answered. "Call the state police," I said. "Dale's route, the house on Pelletier Cut." She started asking questions and I talked over her. I told her about the bag, shirt, and glasses. Then I called 911. Troopers found Roy walking along Route 161, about 20 minutes later. He had a broken wrist and one side of his face was scraped raw. He said I'd stolen mail and tried to run him over. The certified letter was still on my dash. Deputies searched the house. Dale wasn't there. They found blood in the garage, his bag, his uniform shirt, and the missing lens from his glasses. His car was behind the garage under a brown tarp. The plates were gone. Search crews worked into the night. Dale was found the next morning in a hunting shed a few miles into the woods, near an old snowmobile trail. His hands were tied with plastic cord. He was badly cold and could barely speak, but he was alive. Nobody at our office knew why Roy had been waiting for him. Dale never explained much after he came back. He transferred south in the spring. 2 months later, I returned to Pelletier Cut with a postal inspector and a county deputy. Snow covered most of the broken fence. One splintered post still leaned toward the road. Most of the mail I dumped had been recovered. One envelope was frozen under the post. It was addressed to Dale.